Some people think a homeowners association gives them a badge and a set of handcuffs. They think a laminated rulebook makes them the sheriff of a neighborhood that never asked for one. I want to tell you about a woman named Denise Holbrook, the self-appointed queen of Larkspur Ridge Estates, and the night she decided to block the only road leading to my ranch. She thought she was teaching me a lesson about property lines and parking permits. What she actually did was set off a chain of events that ended with her standing in the rain, begging me for the one thing she had just taken away from everyone else. Stick around, because this one has a twist you will not see coming, and by the end, you will understand exactly why karma sometimes drives a pickup truck with a full tank of gas and nowhere to be in a hurry. The road. My name is Wade Calloway, and I run a small cattle operation on 60 acres just outside a town most people have never heard of. My grandfather bought this land back when it was considered too far out to matter to anyone. He built a house, dug a well, and carved a gravel road through what used to be scrubland to connect our property to the county highway. That road has a name on the county plat maps, Calloway Lane. It is not a public road. It is not a private subdivision street. It is an easement road that runs along the edge of what eventually became Larkspur Ridge Estates, a gated community that popped up about 15 years ago when a developer bought the neighboring parcel and decided cattle country needed stucco houses with two-car garages. When the subdivision went in, the developer negotiated an access easement with my father, because it turned out the cheapest way to build the subdivision's main entrance was to widen and pave a section of our existing ranch road. In exchange, the subdivision paid for the paving, agreed to maintain that stretch, and signed a legal document guaranteeing our family permanent, unobstructed access, 24 hours a day, for agricultural equipment, livestock trailers, emergency vehicles, and anything else we needed to move in or out of our own property. It is recorded with the county. It is not a favor. It is not a suggestion. It is a legally binding easement that has survived 3 sets of homeowners and 2 HOA boards. For over a decade, this arrangement worked fine. Neighbors would wave when my truck rolled through. Kids on bikes would stop and let the cattle trailer pass. Some of the older residents would even come out to watch the herd move, telling their grandkids that this was what the land looked like before the subdivision existed, that somewhere under all the sod and sprinkler systems there was still a working ranch holding the whole valley together. It was, by most standards, a peaceful coexistence between a working ranch and a bedroom community, the kind of arrangement that made both sides feel like good neighbors instead of competitors for the same patch of dirt. I want to give credit where it is due. The original HOA board, back when the subdivision was new, understood the value of that peace. They used to send a small crew out twice a year to help me clear brush along the ditches, not because they had to, but because it kept the road safer for everyone, cattle trailer or minivan. There was a kind of quiet respect in those early years, an understanding that a ranch and a subdivision could share a fence line without either one needing to dominate the other. Then Denise Holbrook got elected HOA president 2 years ago, and peaceful coexistence became a memory. Denise moved into Larkspur Ridge from somewhere out of state, and from the moment she arrived, she treated the neighborhood like her personal kingdom. She started with the small stuff. Mailbox colors had to match. Trash cans had to be stored behind a fence, not beside a garage. Christmas lights had to come down by January 15th, not one day later. Homeowners who broke the smallest rule got a letter, then a fine, then a certified letter threatening a lien. People who once loved living in Larkspur Ridge started dreading the sight of her clipboard. It did not take long before she noticed my truck rolling through what she considered her subdivision's entrance every single day. She did not understand, or did not want to understand, that Calloway Lane belonged to my family, easement or not. To her, any vehicle with mud on the tires and a cattle trailer behind it looked like an intrusion, a lowering of property values, an embarrassment to her curated little kingdom of beige houses and manicured lawns. She started small. A note on my gate asking me to use the road at more considerate hours. Then a letter, addressed to my father even though he had been dead for 6 years and the property was in my name, informing me that unauthorized agricultural traffic was a violation of community standards. I responded politely each time, sending her copies of the recorded easement, explaining that this was not a courtesy extended by the HOA but a legal right that predated the subdivision itself. She never seemed to accept it. She would nod, or in her case, send a curt reply, and then find some new angle a few weeks later. I want to be clear that I never wanted trouble with my neighbors. Ranching is hard enough without adding a feud to the workload. I tried, for a long time, to be the reasonable one. I slowed down through the subdivision. I timed my deliveries to avoid school pickup hours. I even offered to pay for a portion of the road's annual maintenance, even though the easement agreement said I did not have to. None of it satisfied Denise. Some people are not looking for a resolution. They are looking for a fight they believe they are destined to win. The real trouble started in early spring, when Denise proposed an amendment to the HOA bylaws that would require anyone using Callaway Lane for non-resident commercial purposes to obtain a permit from the HOA board, pay an access fee, and restrict usage to a 6-hour daytime window. She presented it at a board meeting as a matter of traffic safety and community aesthetics. Never mind that cattle do not check a clock before they need to be moved, or that a ranch does not operate on banker's hours. I attended that meeting because a neighbor tipped me off. I stood up, calm as I could manage, and reminded the board that the easement was a legal document, not an HOA privilege, and that no bylaw amendment could override a recorded property agreement. Denise smiled at me from behind the podium, the kind of smile that tells you the person has already decided you are the villain in their story, and said the board would take it under advisement. A week later, the amendment passed anyway, 3 votes to 2. It had no legal teeth. Any lawyer could have told her that. But Denise was not interested in what was enforceable. She was interested in what she could get away with before someone stopped her. I actually did consult a lawyer after that meeting, mostly out of caution. He read through the easement, read through the HOA's proposed bylaw, and laughed in a way that told me he had seen this kind of thing before. He explained that an HOA has authority over its own members and its own common property, but it cannot unilaterally rewrite the terms of a recorded easement held by a non-member third party. In plain terms, Denise's board could vote on whatever they wanted, but the vote itself did not change what the county recorder's office had on file. He offered to send a formal letter to the board reiterating this, and I agreed, thinking a lawyer's letterhead might succeed where my own polite explanations had failed. It did not. Denise's response, forwarded to me by a sympathetic board member, was 2 sentences long. She wrote that the HOA reserved the right to manage traffic patterns for the safety of its residents, and that she would be monitoring the situation closely. I remember reading that line and feeling, for the first time, a genuine unease. Not because I doubted the law was on my side, but because I sensed that Denise was not planning to negotiate. She was planning to act, and I had no way of knowing when. For a few weeks, nothing changed. I kept driving my road like I always had, though I noticed her sedan parked near the choke point more often than usual, as if she was studying it, measuring it, waiting for the right moment. Then, on a Tuesday night in late April, everything changed. The night she blocked the road. I remember the date because it was the night before I was scheduled to move 40 head of cattle to an auction 2 counties over, a sale I had been planning for months. The trailer was hitched. The truck was fueled. I planned to leave before sunrise to beat the heat and the highway traffic. At around 11 that night, my dog started barking at something down by the gate. I grabbed a flashlight and walked out to check, expecting a raccoon or a stray coyote. Instead, I found 2 orange traffic barricades and a chain strung across the narrowest point of Callaway Lane, right where it passes between 2 drainage ditches, the only spot on the entire road where a vehicle cannot go around the obstruction. Zip tied to the chain was a laminated sign, printed in Denise's unmistakable Comic Sans font, informing anyone who read it that the road was closed for community landscaping and safety review until further notice, by order of the Larkspur Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. I want you to understand what this meant. That drainage ditch section is not a detour situation. There is no side road, no alternate route, no way around it without driving through someone's backyard or across a wash that floods every spring. Callaway Lane, at that choke point, is the only way in or out of my ranch, and it is also, though Denise either did not know this or did not care, the only paved route in or out of the entire back section of Larkspur Ridge Estates, including 12 homes past the point where the newer construction phase extended the subdivision deeper into the hills 2 years earlier. I called Denise's cell phone. No answer. I called the HOA's after hours line, the one that plays a recording asking you to leave a message for urgent matters. I left a message explaining that the road blockage violated a legally recorded easement and that I had cattle to move at dawn. No callback came that night. I could have cut the chain myself. Legally, given the easement, I probably had every right to. But I have lived in this county my whole life, and I know that acting rashly at midnight rarely ends well, especially when a neighbor with a grudge is looking for any excuse to call the sheriff and claim I trespassed or vandalized HOA property. So I did the smart thing. I documented everything. I took photographs of the barricades, the chain, the sign, time-stamped on my phone. I recorded a video walking the length of the blockage, narrating what I was seeing and why it mattered. Then I drove back to the house and started making calls, because I knew that whatever Denise thought she was doing, she had just created a problem far bigger than one ranch missing an auction. The storm rolling in. Here is something Denise did not check before she strung that chain across the road: the weather forecast. That same night, a slow-moving spring storm system was pushing through the region, the kind that dumps rain for 6 or 7 hours straight and turns dry washes into fast-moving water. By 1 in the morning, thunder was rolling across the hills, and the wind had picked up enough to rattle the barn doors. I did not think much of it at first beyond the usual rancher's concern about fences and stock in the open. But around 2 in the morning, my phone lit up. It was Grady Marsh, a longtime friend and one of my closest neighbors on the county roadside, who also happened to be a volunteer with the county fire department. He told me dispatch had just gotten a call from inside Larkspur Ridge Estates. One of the homes in that back section, the 12 houses past the choke point, had a kitchen fire that had spread to an attached garage. Fire crews were en route, but their GPS had them routed straight through Callaway Lane, the fastest and, more importantly, the only paved way to reach that part of the subdivision without a 20-minute detour through unpaved ranch tracks that a fire engine could not safely navigate in the dark during a storm. Grady asked me straight out, was the road passable? I told him what I had found a few hours earlier: barricades, a chain, a laminated sign. He swore under his breath and told me the engine was already rolling and would hit that blockage within minutes. I did not wait for permission from anyone. I grabbed bolt cutters from my shop, jumped in my truck, and drove down to the choke point as fast as the gravel would let me. I got there just as the first set of headlights from the fire engine crested the hill behind me on the county road. I cut the chain, dragged the barricades off to the shoulder, and waved the engine through with my flashlight. It cost me maybe 90 seconds. 90 seconds that, in a fire, can be the difference between a garage and a whole house, or worse. The engine roared past me into the storm, water already pooling in the low spots of the road. I stood there for a minute in the rain, chain in one hand, bolt cutters in the other, thinking about how close that community landscaping and safety review had come to costing someone their home or their life. The fire, and the realization. The fire, it turned out, was at a house belonging to a young couple with a newborn baby, 2 streets deep into the newer phase of the subdivision. A grease fire on the stove had gotten away from them faster than they expected. Thanks to the fire crew arriving with only a few minutes delay instead of the 20-plus minutes the detour would have cost, they managed to contain the blaze to the kitchen and garage before it could spread into the rest of the house or the attic. No one was seriously hurt. The baby and both parents made it out safely, standing on the lawn in the rain while firefighters worked. I did not know any of this until the next morning, when Grady called to fill me in and to tell me something else, something I did not expect. He said that while the fire crew was working the scene, another call had come in. A woman down the block, an older resident with a heart condition, had experienced chest pains around 3 in the morning. Her husband had called for an ambulance. That ambulance, too, was routed straight through Callaway Lane. By the time that second call came in, the chain was already cut and the barricades were off to the side, thanks to what I had done for the fire engine an hour earlier. The ambulance made it through without delay. The woman was treated and stabilized at the hospital. Her husband later told a neighbor that the paramedic said every minute mattered with a case like hers. Here is the detail that still gets me every time I think about it. The woman with the heart condition, the one whose ambulance depended on that road being clear, lived 2 houses down from Denise Holbrook. And the house that caught fire, the one with the newborn baby, belonged to Denise's own daughter and son-in-law, who had moved into Larkspur Ridge Estates the year before, into the newer section that Denise herself had pushed the developer to build. Denise Holbrook had blocked the only road that could save her own family, and it very nearly did not get unblocked in time. The morning after. I learned the full picture the next day, piecing it together from Grady, from neighbors, and eventually from Denise herself. She showed up at my gate around 10 in the morning, still in her robe, hair a mess, eyes red from a night that had clearly not included much sleep. This was not the confident, clipboard-wielding HOA president I had dealt with for 2 years. This was a shaken, humbled woman who had spent the night at the hospital with her daughter's family and then at the emergency room with her elderly neighbor, watching both situations play out with a road that she herself had ordered closed. She did not apologize right away. In fact, her first instinct was still defensive, asking why I had taken it upon myself to cut HOA property. I let her get it out. Then I asked her a simple question. Did she know whose houses were on the other side of that choke point when she ordered the road closed? She admitted she had not thought about it that way. She said the amendment was about unauthorized commercial vehicles, about my cattle trailer specifically, and that she had not considered, or perhaps had never bothered to understand, that the same stretch of road served as the only paved access for every home built in the subdivision's newer phase. She had been so focused on stopping what she saw as an inconvenience to her that she never mapped out what blocking that road actually meant for the people she was supposed to be representing. I told her, as gently as I could manage given the circumstances, that the road was never hers to close in the first place. It was a legal easement, recorded with the county, protected regardless of any HOA vote. What she had done was not just an overreach against me. It was a decision that had put actual lives at risk, including the lives of people she loved most. The community response. Word travels fast in a small community, and it traveled even faster after a fire and a medical emergency happened on the same stormy night that the HOA president had ordered the neighborhood's only emergency access route sealed off. By the following week, an emergency HOA meeting had been called, not by Denise, but by a group of homeowners who wanted answers. I attended that meeting too, at the request of several neighbors who felt my documentation, the photos, the time-stamped video, the easement paperwork, needed to be part of the public record. I laid out the facts calmly. The easement had existed for over a decade. The board had been informed, repeatedly, that it could not legally restrict access. The amendment passed anyway. The road was blocked without notice to residents, without coordination with the fire department or county emergency services, and without any consideration for the 12 homes that depended on that route. One resident, a retired county planner, pointed out that blocking a recorded easement without legal authority could expose the HOA, and potentially Denise personally, to significant liability, especially given that emergency response had been delayed, however briefly, as a direct result. Another resident, the husband of the woman who had the chest pains that night, stood up and, in a voice shaking with anger and relief in equal measure, said that his wife was alive because a stranger with bolt cutters had refused to let a laminated sign stand between his neighbors and help. Denise resigned from the HOA board that same week. Not because anyone forced a vote, though one was clearly coming, but because she said, in her own words, that she could no longer trust her own judgment after that night. The new board's first order of business was to formally recognize the Callaway Lane easement in writing, remove the illegal amendment from the bylaws, and establish a clear emergency protocol ensuring that route would never again be obstructed for any reason without direct coordination with county emergency services. What came after? I would like to tell you that Denise and I became close friends after all this, that we sit on porches together now sharing lemonade and laughing about the whole ordeal. That is not quite how it went, and I think that is a more honest ending anyway. What did happen is that she stopped seeing me, and my ranch, and my cattle trailer, as some kind of inconvenience to be managed and controlled. She started seeing the road for what it actually was, a lifeline, one that existed long before her subdivision did, one that had nothing to do with property values or aesthetics, and everything to do with the basic ability of people to get help when they need it most. A few months later, she sent me a letter, an actual handwritten letter, not a laminated notice. In it, she thanked me for what I did that night, acknowledged that she had let her position go to her head, and admitted that she had spent so much energy trying to control small things that she had lost sight of what actually mattered. She mentioned her daughter's new baby, safe and healthy, and her neighbor, recovering well after her cardiac procedure. She said she thought about how differently that night could have ended almost every day. I still run my cattle down Callaway Lane every season. The road is paved the same way it always was, choke point and all. But there is no chain there anymore, no barricades, no laminated signs. Just a quiet stretch of gravel and asphalt that connects a working ranch to a subdivision that, for a little while, forgot it needed that connection just as much as I did. Closing thoughts. I think about this story sometimes when I hear people talk about rules for the sake of rules, about power used to control rather than to serve. Denise was not a bad person. She was someone who let a title convince her that her judgment did not need to be questioned, that a laminated sign carried more weight than a recorded legal document, that inconvenience to her was reason enough to risk the safety of everyone around her. It took a fire, a storm, and an ambulance ride to remind her that the rules we make are only as good as the wisdom behind them. If there is a lesson here, I think it is this. Before you block someone else's road, make sure you know where it actually leads, because you might just find out you need it more than anyone. Rules exist to serve people, not the other way around, and the moment we forget that, we risk turning ordinary neighbors into strangers, and ordinary nights into emergencies that never needed to happen. A community, at its best, is not a set of laminated notices or a list of fines waiting to be issued. It is a group of people who understand that the road one person depends on today might be the same road another person is praying stays open tomorrow. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, let me know in the comments what you would have done in my position, and stick around for more stories like this one coming soon.